Dancers have a lot to balance. From their pirouettes to their jumps, a dancer's performance is a direct result of hard work and motivation. So where does food fit into this? There's a lot of myths and a ton of antiquated ideals about what a dancer's diet should look like. I'm Rachel Fine, registered dietitian nutritionist and founder of To The Point Nutrition, and I'm here to dispel those.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me today, Sophie.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for us to connect and hear all of your thoughts. Sophie, I'd love for you to just take a moment to introduce yourself to me and well, I know a lot about you, but introduce yourself to all of the dancers who are watching now and who are going to tune in later on.
Okay, hi. I'm Sophie Poulain. I'm dancing with Atlanta Ballet right now. I'm about to go into my second season, like in August. So I'm on my summer layoff at the moment. And I'm 23 years old and from Canada originally.
Nice. So it looks like you have beautiful weather behind you.
Yeah, I'm in New York right now for my layoff. My boyfriend is from here originally, so we stay with his family. And like I'm taking class at Steps and I'm going to take class at Ellison later in the summer. So
I
yeah.
love that. All of some of my old stomping grounds, which I love. Very nice. Well, summer layoff, that's an interesting topic for us to kind of dive into because a lot of dancers experience summer layoff and sometimes it brings on its own set of challenges, especially as you gear up for August and gear up for the transition. So, Sophie, can you share a bit about what some of the things you're thinking of during this time away from the studio, or not really away from the studio, but just as you gear up for that transition?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of nice because I think it gives me an opportunity to work on like all of the things that I want to work on for myself, like away from my employers. I like that I don't have a ton of like rehearsals and shows to worry about for a few months because I can go into the studio and take class every day and work on like really specific things and kind of exhaust myself in technique class every day and then go home and lay down, which is kind of a bit of a luxury, which you don't get to have when you have a 6 hour rehearsal day after class, usually during the
Mhm.
season. Um, so for me, I use it just as like kind of a time to be a student a little bit again, because that's also something I really miss when I'm working, is just like you take it for granted when you're in school, but then when you're out of school, it's like I miss so much everything that you can learn and gain from like studying ballet. So I kind of use it as time for myself in that way.
hmm Yeah, I think that brings up a really interesting difference between like pre-professional life and professional life, and just that feeling of taking it for granted in
Yeah.
regard to especially like the fine tuning, right? And the focus on technique.
Hmm.
And this isn't the best phrase to use, but the bringing it back to basics from a
Yeah.
technical standpoint, right? And the difference
Hmm.
of when you're in that professional setting and really focusing more on whether it's picking up new choreography or that the artistry perspective. So
Yeah.
I love hearing that you're able to almost like compartmentalize what you can take away from these different experiences, right? And focusing on your technique now once
Hmm.
before you get back to the company.
Yeah, and it's nice too, like when you're in a ballet class that's more of like a school setting, the like individualized attention and care that you get from your teachers is really nice. And um, not to say that when you're in a company, like artistic staff doesn't really care about the dancers, they do care about all of you, but it's just like the care and attention to detail and your development as an artist on an individual level is a lot more like personalized when you're in school. And so in the summer, I like to take advantage of that as much as I can as well, because it's like, it can be like when you're in a company, you really have to be doing everything for yourself. Like you have to be the
Yeah.
person that pushes yourself to go to the limit and apply your corrections and all of those things. And when you're in a school environment, you get a lot of help with that, which is so nice and can be really like uplifting in the summers, like in between seasons. So,
hmm
yeah.
I just love
Yeah.
hearing that. I love hearing that you take it upon yourself to almost go back to that type of setting because it is so helpful, especially almost to regroup.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And like you said, when you're in company life, so much is coming down to you in regard to almost being your own admin,
Hmm.
right? Being your own advocate, of course, too, but also just being your own admin, being in charge of your schedule, your day to day,
Yeah.
from your cross training to whatever it
Yeah,
might be. So
exactly.
yeah, so having as you said, the luxury, right, to get back into that setting is it's really grounding. I
Hmm.
think that's really helpful for a lot of dancers to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice. And it's also, yeah, for like the mentality of it to have teachers in the summer that are really like uplifting to you on like a
Mm.
personal level is good because it's something I find like I can get that a lot more in the summer and then carry it with me throughout the season. So,
Yeah, I love that. Sophie, I'm curious about when during your training or company life you've been able to connect the dots between your success in the studio or on stage and behaviors that are we can kind of like fall in regard to self-care. And that also includes like fueling your body,
mhm.
taking time for rest. So any words of insight or when you were able to really first make those connections?
I mean, I think that is something that for me is like a constantly evolving topic because I feel like there's been a lot of periods in my training and in my professional career that I feel like, oh, okay, like I understand this now. And then a little bit of time passes and I'm like, oh, I understand it even more now than I did before. So it's like constantly changing and evolving with me as I go throughout my career. This past season, we had a really intense Nutcracker season. Atlanta Valley's Nutcracker is really demanding, and we have a lot of shows. Um, and partway through our rehearsal process for that, I was having party scene rehearsals like into the evening, and I was having the worst migraines, and then driving home in Atlanta traffic with all like in the dark with all of the lights and everything, and it was really, really like challenging physically to get through that. And I was like, okay, let me reflect on how much I'm actually eating and drinking throughout my rehearsal day because it can be easy to kind of neglect that when you're so busy, when you have 6 hours of rehearsal back to back to back every single day. Um, yeah, and changing a little bit how I was fueling myself throughout the day and also refilling my water bottle enough times throughout the day. It's crazy how something seemingly so simple can make such a huge difference in how you feel. Like it was really the difference between getting through the day and feeling like just a regular amount of tired or feeling like I had a migraine and I was going to vomit at like the last hour of rehearsal. So,
Yeah.
and that was, yeah, that was a big one for me, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, sounds like it was you were almost forced to really make that connection,
Hmm.
right? In order to get through a very intense season, you had to, and I love the words that you chose here, reflect and really start to reflect on how you were eating, whether or not you were hydrating enough, because for so many dancers, whether professional or pre-professional, this is what often falls to the waistline first.
Hmm.
Because, like you said, busy schedules get in the way, but not only do we have busy schedules, we've got intense physical demands. So it's very it's almost biological that well, not almost, it is a biological response here is that our body's hunger cues go haywire and they're
Yeah.
unreliable, right? So um, really being very on top of making sure, am I eating enough, am I drinking enough, is the only way you're going to really get through that intense performance season without ending in an injury.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And I like what you said about like hunger cues because when you are dancing that much, like my body, I don't feel hungry. Like it just doesn't happen. Then when I get home and I've been sitting down for an hour, I'm like ravenous and famished and
Yeah.
it like hits me all at once.
Yeah.
And that is also something that I had to learn is that you need to be like strategic and plan ahead for what your body needs because it doesn't tell you when you're that busy. It's
Yes.
just it doesn't even happen for me. Like
Yeah.
sometimes what would happen too is I would have my lunch break. I would not be hungry on my lunch break, and then 5 minutes into rehearsal after my lunch break, everything would hit me all at once, and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh." I made a mistake. I should have I should have been thinking ahead and just made myself eat my lunch that I had packed.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely something that I had to learn as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a learning curve for every dancer, honestly. It's just a
Hmm.
matter of when that learning curve hits. For some, it hits during their pre-professional years, and for others, it's during their professional years. And also for you, coming from Canada to the US, you also had that factor of being in a new place. When did that happen for you? When did you make that transition?
So, so I moved away to study in Europe when I was 16, and I had done like summer programs before that. And my dad's side of the family is French, so
Okay.
I did a lot of my training over there until COVID happened,
Mm.
and then in 2022, after I did my first like kind of professional season, I was dancing with Alberta Ballet, and I was 19 at the time. And I have a coach also in Florida, Magali Suarez, who I trained with growing up as well, like on and off, on and off. And after my first season when I was 19, like dancing professionally, I was kind of like COVID had happened, and I was feeling like I wasn't really prepared to be like mentally and physically strong enough to handle professional life. And so
Mm.
I made the decision to take a gap year, and I went to back to Florida, and I was between the Rock School and the Art of Classical Ballet. And I was doing 2 weeks at the Rock in Philadelphia and 2 weeks in Florida, traveling back and forth with my coach because she was teaching in both places. And I got my student visa through that. And I've been in the United States ever since then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in a way, it is not too different from Canada, which is nice. It was like familiar to me in a lot of ways. Like I love I love a lot of cereal that's in the United States that like I couldn't get when I
I
was
do
going to
too.
school in Europe. Yeah, so it was not too difficult of a transition that way. I think it was just the the more challenging part of it is just to be like so on your own and to not have like family around you and to sort of figure those things out. And I had when another thing is a lot of people when they're going to school, you're in a boarding school and they're feeding you all the time. And then when you're in a company or you're just living in an apartment on your own, you have to deal with all of that yourself for the first time. And so that I think was probably one of the more challenging things to navigate. I mean, I figured it out, but it's just, again, it's a learning curve.
Yeah. Yeah, wow, you had a lot of moving parts like in one time, especially having this been also like post COVID, where
Hmm.
so much of the dance world was just thrown for a loop for quite a long time, right? Like it was,
Yeah.
well past 2020. So, oh my gosh, I give you a lot of credit because, yeah, you had a lot of moving parts and really were able to. I'm sure there were lots of challenges along the way that go beyond just a 5 minute little discussion about it, but we're obviously able to move through it successfully, right, to get to where you are now. So that's
Hmm.
really incredible. And of course, I'm sure that all of those realizations that we just spoke about before in regards to like fueling your body and making sure that you had what you need from an energy standpoint, it sounds like were even more so needed during that time, like when you had all of those transitions and moving to a new place every 2 weeks, like
Yeah.
that's that's really challenging.
Yeah. It
Mm-hmm.
was. Yeah. I had when I was in Philadelphia and Florida, like going between the two places, I had an apartment in Philly and then I had my car down in Florida and I would stay with like friends in Florida, but I kept all of my stuff in my car in Florida and then I had my things in Philadelphia. And it was
Yeah.
in a way though, it was nice because it forced me to be super organized and on top of
Yeah.
everything. Like it was like a do or die situation.
Yeah.
And so I just had to learn how to do things. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's better for me. Like I really thrive with structure like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was for me nice to have like to have to plan, okay, I have 2 weeks in Philadelphia. I need to go get my groceries for 2 weeks. I need to know my schedule for 2 weeks. Then I go to Florida. It's a little bit different. So it's a change of pace, which keeps it like interesting and exciting. Things were never boring for me. Um, but again, I had to plan for my 2 weeks there and have everything like really down to the day. So I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that is actually something that I was able to take away from that and bring with me into like my professional career is like this sort of one day at a time mentality to help break
Yeah.
things down so that they didn't become too like overwhelming.
hmm Yeah, the word that hits me is just adaptive, right? You
Yeah.
had to adapt to this type of lifestyle, which by the way just feels very relatable to me because when oh actually it wasn't COVID, it was this is like beyond this is prior way prior, but for those listening who might understand and realize back in when I was doing my clinicals as a dietitian in New York City, Hurricane Sandy hit, which was a really bad hurricane that like the tri-state area got really badly hit. New York City, I mean, hospitals closed. It was a disaster. And I was in my clinicals at the hospital during this time, also dancing at that time too. So I was like shuffling back and forth from like being in the city, being on Long Island, and it just feels very relatable. I know that feeling of like where your car becomes your office
Yes.
and you're really forced to have to build some type of structure because that's the only way that you're going to successfully handle
Hmm.
not just like your dancing, like the actual physical demands of your dancing, but all of the in between, getting to where you have to be and getting there on time.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's awesome. This is great. I am also curious to hear about, and it's a question that I ask to everyone on this little series that I have, and you've answered it in ways already, but how would you personally redefine what it means to be the healthy dancer? And you've touched on it a bit in regards to just that needing that flexible structure to help you prioritize various things in your
Mhm.
training, but can you share any more insight on that?
Yeah, I think for me too, such an important thing that I've come to learn over the last few years in my career is having to be like your own advocate and like believing in yourself and trusting yourself and having fun with what you do. I think I try and keep those things at like front of mind when I can. And obviously it's easier said than done. Like sometimes there's difficult times where you lose sight of that a little bit, but that's always what I try to come back to keep myself from like spiraling and getting too intense about things because I think as dancers, everyone just naturally has a personality that's like of a perfectionist and quite intense because you need to have that to survive in this industry. Um, but I try to remind myself that it is so hard that if I'm not having fun, there's really no point in doing it because at that point it's just like torturing yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think like trying to find a place where I can be at ease when I'm dancing and enjoy what I'm doing and believe that what I'm doing is of value has been really important for me. Also, just being like at the beginning of my professional career and a little bit younger and like not as established, it's like an important thing to try and find because you need to find it like within yourself first before other people are going to like help like give it to you in a way. So I think that's been like a really big thing for me. I also have two cats at home and they help me too. I love them very much. So,
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a really great takeaway in regard to just understanding what your personal needs are, being able to identify that, which you've been able to do at a relatively younger age, which is amazing. And knowing that there's a delicate balance, right, between needing that degree of perfectionism that helps to motivate us, but at the same time understanding that it's always the point is always to make sure you don't lose your passion. When you lose your love, when you lose your passion, that's when you head towards burnout. And what was the point? You know what I mean?
yeah.
That's when we start to sacrifice our performance.
Hmm.
And that's incredibly important. That's a really hard balance for most dancers to identify. And oftentimes, in order to identify it, it takes a lot of that, as you said, reflection, right?
Yeah.
Reflection on, well, why am I not feeling great right now? Why am I losing energy? Did I eat enough? Did I drink enough? Am I getting enough sleep? What do I need right now? Do I need to just hang out with my cats and
Yeah.
cuddle with them? Or for my dog lovers, do I need to go out and just go on a walk in the park? And, there's nothing has to be fancy here. Nothing has to feel unattainable.
Hmm.
But just that reflection is huge. And I
Yeah.
love that as really a takeaway. So, Sophie, thank you so much. This was
Yeah, of
wonderful.
course. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've loved connecting with you, and we'll talk soon.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good rest of your day.